I always thought funerals brought clarity, like grief had a way of washing the dust off old memories so you could finally see people for who they really were. But standing there on the frozen grass of St. Augustine Cemetery, watching my Aunt Charlotte's casket lower into the earth, I felt more confused than I had in years. My breath fogged in the cold air. The January wind cut through my coat, but I barely noticed. I kept staring at the dark wooden coffin as if it would open and she would sit up and tell us all to stop being dramatic. My mother stood beside me, stiff and silent. Her gloved fingers dug into my arm every time somebody approached us to say how sorry they were. My cousin Emily was crying softly beside the grave, her fiancé's arm wrapped around her shoulders. And then there was Ian, my aunt's husband, standing with the same unreadable expression he always had. He looked more like a man solving a puzzle than burying his wife. The sky was a dull, unforgiving gray. I'd flown home 2 days earlier because my mother insisted I had to come, even though I hadn't seen my aunt in almost a year. Not since the fight. Not since she had pulled me aside during a family dinner, lowered her voice, and told me something she said I needed to hear. Something I had refused to believe. Even now, her final words to me rang in the back of my mind. If anything happens to me, don't trust him. At the time I thought she was being paranoid. Dramatic. Exhausted from stress. Now she was gone, dead from what the coroner called a heart attack, but something in her voice that night refused to stop echoing inside me. I stared at Ian across the graveyard. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He just looked calm. Too calm. My mother whispered that we should leave. She said funerals were for closure and I was only making myself miserable by staring like that. Her tone had that clipped sharpness she used whenever she felt I was close to asking the wrong questions. We returned to the house, my aunt's house. The one where I'd spent countless weekends as a kid. The one that always smelled like cinnamon tea and old books. Now it smelled like sorrow, strangers, and casseroles dropped off by neighbors who barely knew us. I walked inside and immediately felt out of place. People I didn't recognize filled the living room, clutching paper cups of coffee, speaking in hushed tones. Emily rushed forward and hugged me tightly, her shoulders shaking. She kept saying she didn't understand how this could happen. How her mother hadn't been sick. How one moment she was fine and the next, gone. I told her I was sorry. That I was here. That anything she needed, I would stay as long as she wanted. She nodded, wiping her tears, and said she needed me later, that it was important. The way she said it made a knot form in my stomach. Ian appeared then, thanking guests, shaking hands, offering practiced lines about grief and loss. When he reached me, he took my hands warmly. He said he was glad I came. That Charlotte loved me. That family mattered now more than ever. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His hands were warm, but his eyes were cold. He said he wanted to talk to me privately later. That there were matters to sort out, papers to sign, family details to clarify. He said it the way someone might say there was trash to take out or laundry to fold. Emily's eyes flicked toward him with something like fear. My mother quickly stepped between us and said she would handle any paperwork. Ian smiled politely, but the tightness in his jaw was unmistakable. As the crowd thinned, Emily pulled me upstairs to her bedroom, the same room where we'd once braided each other's hair and whispered secrets long after midnight. She closed the door behind us and leaned against it, breathing hard. She said she needed to tell me something. Something her mother had left behind. Something she'd found in the house last night when she couldn't sleep. Then she reached under her bed and pulled out a small metal box. Old. Scratched. Locked. My heart kicked hard inside my chest. She said she found it behind a loose floorboard, wrapped in a towel like someone had tried to hide it quickly. She said she hadn't shown it to Ian. She said she didn't trust him. Her mother's voice echoed in my head again. Don't trust him. I asked her what was inside. She said she didn't know. The lock was too old and jammed. But then she handed me something. A folded piece of paper. My name written on the front. In my aunt's handwriting. My palms went cold. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers trembling. Inside was a short message written in shaky ink, as if she'd written it late at night or in fear. If you're reading this, it means he got to me. Do not believe anything he says. Do not stay in this house. And check the date on the insurance policy. I reread the note twice, my stomach dropping further each time. I asked Emily if she knew what that meant. She shook her head, terrified. But I knew one thing instantly. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't drama. This wasn't grief talking. Aunt Charlotte had been afraid. Of Ian. And of something connected to money. I told Emily we needed to get out of the house immediately. Before I could finish the sentence, someone knocked on the bedroom door. Hard. Steady. Too steady. Ian's voice came through the wood, polite, calm, chilling. He said he knew we were in there. He said he needed to speak to both of us. He said now was not the time for secrets. Emily's hand clamped around mine. I folded the letter quickly and shoved it into my coat pocket. Ian rattled the doorknob. He said he didn't want to force his way in. My heart thudded painfully. Emily whispered my name, voice trembling. And then Ian said something that made my blood run cold. Your mother wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Ian's voice on the other side of the door froze both of us. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't grieving. It was steady, too steady for a man who had buried his wife 5 hours earlier. Emily's fingers tightened around mine like she was holding onto a rope. Her breathing quickened. I could hear it, thin, shaky, terrified. I whispered that she needed to stay quiet. She nodded. Ian rattled the doorknob again, this time harder. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. He told Emily that he knew about the box. He told her he knew she found Charlotte's little stash. He told her it was time to hand it over. Emily let out a tiny gasp. My pulse hammered in my ears. I stepped closer to the door, voice shaking but firm. I told Ian we would talk downstairs, in the living room, where everyone could hear us. Where it was safe. He paused. Then he said no. That conversations of this kind didn't belong in front of strangers. Strangers? He meant the neighbors. The cousins. The family friends still lingering downstairs. He wanted us alone. No. Absolutely not. I told him that if he didn't step away from the door, I would scream. Loud. Loud enough to bring everyone upstairs. For the first time since arriving at the house, his voice cracked. He said we were blowing things out of proportion. That Charlotte had been dramatic. That she had a habit of making people paranoid. That grief was clouding our judgment. Every word was a red flag. I told him we needed space. I told him we were coming downstairs when we were ready. He didn't argue. He didn't force the door. He just said, "You girls are making this harder than it needs to be." Then his footsteps moved down the hall. But they didn't sound like footsteps leaving. They sounded like pacing. Waiting. Listening. I exhaled shakily and turned to Emily. She was pale, trembling, eyes glossy with fear. She whispered that her mother always told her Ian had a temper, not a loud one, a quiet one. The kind that simmered. The kind that didn't break plates or slam doors, but broke people. She said her mother told her once, years ago, after a fight behind closed doors, that Ian apologized too easily. Too smoothly. Too perfectly. Like a man trained in manipulation. My throat tightened. I asked her if Aunt Charlotte had ever said she was afraid of him. Emily nodded slowly. She said yes. But never in full sentences. Always in fragments. Always when she thought Emily wouldn't remember. Then she whispered the worst part. Her mother had changed her life insurance policy 6 months ago. I froze. I asked her how she knew. She said she saw the envelope on the desk one morning before school. She asked her mother what it was. Her mother quickly hid it and said it was nothing. But Emily had seen the words beneficiary change at the top. She hadn't thought about it since. Until now. My aunt's last note echoed painfully in my head. Check the date on the insurance policy. I told Emily we had to see the policy immediately. She said the home office was on the first floor. And the filing cabinet was in Ian's domain. I told her we weren't going anywhere alone. We would find her fiancé, her father's cousin, someone, anyone, to stay near us. Emily nodded and wiped her eyes. She picked up the metal box, clutching it close. Then she grabbed her phone from the bed and slipped it into her pocket. I opened the bedroom door just a crack. The hallway was empty. But I could feel Ian nearby. Like you feel heat from an oven without touching it. We moved quickly down the hall, then down the stairs. People were still in the living room, talking quietly over coffee and casseroles, coats still draped over arms and chairs. The house hummed with grief and discomfort. The moment Ian saw us descending the stairs, he appeared at the bottom. Smiling. Polite. Charming. Terrifying. He said he just wanted to talk. He said we were family. He said Charlotte would hate to see all this tension. I ignored him and scanned the room until I saw Emily's fiancé, Mark. Solid. Calm. Level-headed. I called him over. Ian's eyes darkened for a fraction of a second. Mark came to us immediately, sensing something was wrong. Emily whispered to him, too fast for me to hear, but I saw his posture change instantly, from relaxed to alert. He asked Ian if everything was okay. Ian smiled that too perfect smile and said everything was fine, just family matters. Mark didn't move. Ian's jaw clenched. Emily squeezed my hand and whispered that she needed air. She needed to get out of the house. Right now. I agreed. We stepped toward the front door, but Ian sidestepped to block our path casually, still pretending to be polite. He lowered his voice and said he needed the box. Emily hid the box behind her back instinctively. Ian leaned in just slightly, so close I could smell his cologne, something sharp and expensive. He said. Charlotte didn't know what she was talking about. Don't make the mistake of believing her last few fantasies. Emily flinched. I felt fury rise in me, hot, steady, cold at the same time. I said loudly, loud enough for the room to hear, that Aunt Charlotte left a note. A few people looked up. Ian's expression broke for the first time. Just a crack. I said she warned us not to trust him. I said she wrote it down. I said we had the note. Emily's breathing hitched. Ian's smile vanished. He said Charlotte had been sick. Mentally sick. Paranoid. Delusional. Mark stepped between us. Ian straightened, face tightening, eyes flickering with contempt he quickly smothered. He said, in a calmer voice, that we were grieving. That we were making mistakes. That we needed to put the box down and talk rationally. That was when Emily said something that made everyone in the room freeze mid-sip. She said. My mother changed her insurance beneficiary. Didn't she? Ian's hands twitched. Emily asked again, louder. She asked who the policy named now. She asked why her mother hid it. She asked why the date mattered. Ian finally broke character. He hissed her name like a warning, low and sharp. Mark immediately stepped closer to Emily protectively. I grabbed her arm and said we were leaving. Ian grabbed the other. And for a moment, the entire room held its breath. Then someone's voice, an older neighbor's, cut the silence sharply, asking if we were okay. Ian released Emily instantly, plastering on his polite mask again. He said everything was fine. He said the girls were emotional. He said grief was complicated. I had to get Emily out. I whispered to her, now. We moved fast, straight past Ian, through the front door, down the porch steps. I heard Ian call Emily's name behind us. But Mark followed us out. And with him near, Ian didn't chase us. Once we reached the sidewalk, Emily practically collapsed into tears. She said she knew something was wrong. She said she felt guilty for not seeing it sooner. She said her mother had tried to protect her, and she failed her. I hugged her tightly. Then I told her something I hadn't said yet. I told her that my Aunt Charlotte had told me not to trust Ian months ago. The night of the fight. The night she said something she never had the chance to explain. If anything happens to me, he will make it look natural. Emily's knees buckled. I held her upright. Mark said we needed to go somewhere safe, away from the house. We agreed. Emily suggested the library, quiet, empty on weekends, far from Ian. We walked there together, our breaths shaking in the icy air. Inside, we found a quiet table in the corner. Emily placed the box down between us. The metal looked older than I remembered, scratched, dented in one corner, the lock rusted. I pulled the letter from my coat pocket. Emily stared at it like she wanted to cry all over again. She whispered that she missed her mother. That she wished she'd paid more attention. That she wished she'd asked more questions. I told her there was still a chance her mother had left her the truth. Inside the box. The lock was old, flimsy. Mark went to the front desk and returned with a pair of bolt cutters used for opening lost locker deposits. He looked at Emily for confirmation. Her chin trembled, but she nodded. He cut the lock. The box creaked open. Inside were several old envelopes. A thick stack of printed emails. A USB flash drive. A folded legal document. A small velvet bag. Emily's hand shook as she picked up the legal document first. Her eyes scanned it. Her face went pale. She looked at me with pure horror. She said, "The old beneficiary, wasn't me." My stomach dropped. I asked who it was. Her voice cracked. "It was, you." I blinked. No. That made no sense. Emily said her mother had changed the policy 6 months ago, but before that, for the past 5 years, the beneficiary had not been her daughter. It had been me. I felt my mouth go dry. I asked her why her mother would do that. Emily said she didn't know. But her mother must have trusted me more than anyone. Or she must have feared something so much she thought I needed protection. She kept reading. Then she gasped. Her hands covered her mouth. She whispered, "Oh my God, she wrote a second will." I felt the world tilt. A second will. Hidden. Secret. Emily handed it to me. I unfolded it, heart pounding. Aunt Charlotte wrote that if anything happened to her, anything, and it could not be clearly proven as natural, then everything she owned, her savings, her business shares, her lake house, her personal accounts, would transfer not to Emily, but to me. Not Emily. Me. My breath caught. Why? Why me? Emily sobbed into her hands. I felt sick. I asked her if she had known. She said never. Not in a million years. She said she didn't understand. She said she wasn't angry, she was terrified. Because if Ian knew, or even suspected, that I was the beneficiary of the alternate will, then Aunt Charlotte's warnings weren't paranoia. They were premonition. I reached into the box for the stack of printed emails. The subject lines made my hands go cold. Policy inquiry. Urgent beneficiary question. Second will inquiry. Change of control. Sent not to my aunt. Sent from her. To a private investigator. 6 months ago. My chest tightened painfully. Then I opened the last envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, shaky, rushed. It said, "If you're reading this, he found the first will. He is planning something. Please protect Emily." She believes she is safe, but she is not. And neither are you. I looked up at Emily. Her face drained of all color. I whispered. He wasn't after you. Emily shook her head, horrified. He was after me. Then something hit me so hard I nearly dropped the note. If Ian thought I stood in the way of inheriting everything. If he believed I was the one her mother secretly trusted. If he suspected I was the beneficiary of the hidden will. Then Aunt Charlotte hadn't died of a heart attack. She had been silenced. And now? So would I. In that moment, Emily's phone buzzed. One new text. From Ian. Where are you both? We need to finish our conversation. I felt the blood drain from my face. Emily whispered. He knows. I whispered back. He's coming. Emily's phone buzzed again. Another message from Ian. I'm heading out now. Don't make me look for you. My breath hitched. The library suddenly felt too quiet, too exposed, its tall glass windows turning the outside world into a reflective mirror. Anyone walking by could see us, three figures hunched over a metal box of secrets that had destroyed one life already. Mark cursed under his breath and said we needed to leave immediately. Emily nodded, trembling so hard she could barely zip her coat. I stuffed the will and the letter into my pocket, along with the envelope addressed to me. But then my hand touched something else inside the box. The velvet bag. Small. Heavy. Important. I grabbed it too. We moved toward the back exit of the library, our footsteps echoing too loudly in the quiet hallway. Each sound felt like a countdown. Emily kept looking over her shoulder. Mark kept scanning the windows. My heart beat so hard it hurt. Once we were outside, the cold air slapped my face sharply enough to shock me back into focus. We needed a plan. Mark said we should go to his apartment, neutral ground, close by, secure. Emily agreed instantly. I hesitated. Ian knew Emily's fiancé. He could guess where she might go. I said we needed somewhere he wouldn't expect. Somewhere he couldn't track easily. Somewhere with people around but not enough chaos to lose control. My brain raced. Then it hit me. The church. The small, old chapel near the cemetery where Aunt Charlotte used to light candles every Sunday morning. A place Ian hated. A place that was always open during the day. A place with a back office and lockable doors. Emily nodded quickly. Mark agreed. He pulled his car around the corner, making sure no one followed. When he parked outside the church, the bell tower loomed above us like a sentinel watching over our disaster. The heavy wooden doors creaked when Mark opened them, and the three of us slipped inside. It was quiet, so quiet the silence almost rang. The faint scent of incense lingered in the air. Stained glass windows painted the pews in soft blocks of color. A single row of candles flickered at the front, casting restless shadows across the altar. Emily let out a shaky breath and slid into the first pew. I sat beside her. Mark pulled the velvet bag from my hands and opened it. Inside was a flash drive. Black. Unmarked. Emily whispered that her mother must have left something digital, something she couldn't risk printing or writing down. Something dangerous. Mark handed it back to me and said we needed a laptop. The church office usually had one, but before he could check, Emily's phone buzzed again. A new message. From an unknown number this time. I see your car. Emily's face drained of color. Mark swore and grabbed the phone. Emily whispered that she had turned off location services and left her own car at the house. How could he? And then we both realized it at the same time. Ian didn't need her phone. He knew her fiancé's car. He knew her schedule. He knew her habits. He knew her. He knew that if Emily ran, she would go somewhere familiar, somewhere sentimental, somewhere her mother loved. He knew exactly where we were. The church door creaked again. This time, it wasn't us. All three of us froze. Footsteps echoed slowly across the wooden floor. Measured. Controlled. Familiar. Ian stepped into the chapel, his silhouette framed by the doorway behind him, cold air curling around his legs. He closed the door gently, almost reverently, as if he belonged there. As if he owned the space. His voice echoed through the empty chapel. He said he wished it didn't have to be like this. Emily whimpered. Mark positioned himself between us and Ian. Ian walked slowly down the aisle, hands in his pockets, expression calm. Too calm. He said he understood why we were scared. He said grief made people irrational. He said secrets twisted families apart. He said Charlotte had been unwell for years. My voice cracked as I told him to stay away from us. He smiled, softly. Then he said, Charlotte wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of herself. I shook my head immediately. Lies. Manipulation. Gaslighting. But then his eyes sharpened. He said she had been hiding something far worse than a second will. Something that could ruin her reputation. Something that could land her in prison if anyone found out. I looked at Emily, horrified. She whispered that her mother was a good person. She wouldn't hurt anyone. Ian tilted his head slightly. Then he said, You think a second will is the only secret you found? Cold dread crawled up my spine. He said Charlotte hadn't planned to give me everything out of kindness. She had done it out of guilt. Guilt for what? He stepped closer, voice lower now. He said the private investigator Charlotte had contacted wasn't looking into him. She was looking into someone else. Someone she believed had stolen from her company. Someone she believed had endangered her daughter's future. Someone she believed needed to be exposed. He paused. Then he said the investigator found nothing. Because the embezzlement wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside. From her own company. From her own sister. My breath caught in my throat. My mother. Ian nodded slowly, reading my expression. He said Charlotte had discovered that my mother had been siphoning small amounts of money from their shared business account for years, tiny sums that didn't trip audits, rounded off numbers listed as miscellaneous expenses. Plausible. Innocent looking. Easy to miss. Except Charlotte didn't miss it. Not eventually. Ian said Charlotte confronted my mother quietly. Privately. Not wanting Emily or me to know. My mother claimed innocence. But the investigator traced the money directly into accounts connected to my mother. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Ian said that after that, Charlotte had two choices. Expose her sister. Or protect the family. She chose to protect the family. Until the will. I felt sick. Confused. Betrayed. Ian's voice softened with the kind of false sympathy that makes your skin crawl. He said Charlotte changed her beneficiary because she couldn't trust her sister. She needed someone stable. Reliable. Someone who wouldn't betray Emily the way her mother had betrayed Charlotte. Someone like me. Emily began sobbing. Mark clenched his fists so tightly I thought he might break his own bones. I asked Ian why he was telling us all this. He said because Charlotte had planned to tell me everything. On the night she died. But she didn't get the chance. My pulse roared in my ears. I asked him if he was admitting to something. He looked almost offended. He said Charlotte really had suffered a heart attack. But not from anything he did. From what she discovered. From the investigator's final report. From the realization that someone she trusted, her own sister, had betrayed her for years. He stepped closer. Now only a few feet away. Then he said something that made my blood turn to ice. Charlotte died holding her phone. Do you know who she called? My mouth went dry. Emily shook her head violently. Ian's voice dropped to a whisper. She called your mother. The world spun. My heart pounded against my ribs. Emily gasped, tears streaming down her face. I staggered backward until the pew hit the back of my knees. Ian said her mother didn't answer. She let the call go to voicemail. The investigator had forwarded the audio to Charlotte earlier that day. She had heard everything. Every transaction. Every lie. Every calculation. And she had died before she could confront my mother again. I whispered that I didn't believe him. I couldn't believe him. He shrugged. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A USB drive. Identical to the one we found in the velvet bag. He held it up. He said. She made 2 copies. Everything inside me froze. Before he could say another word, Mark lunged. Ian dodged him easily, stepping back down the aisle. Emily screamed his name. Mark stumbled but regained balance, grabbing the nearest pew to steady himself. Ian backed toward the door, still holding the flash drive. He said he didn't want to involve the police. He said all he wanted was the metal box. He said he would walk away if we handed it over. Emily whispered. You expect us to trust you? Ian smiled, a thin, hollow expression. Then he said. Trust has nothing to do with it. Survival does. And then? He turned. And ran. Mark sprinted after him, yelling. But Ian was fast. Too fast. By the time we reached the doorway, Ian was already speeding down the street in his car, tires shrieking against the pavement. Emily collapsed onto the church steps, sobbing. Mark knelt beside her. I stood frozen, the cold air biting my face, the world spinning around me. Ian had escaped. He had a USB. We had one too. And the box. And the alternate will. And the note. And the truth. But the biggest twist had already detonated. My own mother was the reason my aunt changed her will. My own mother was the one Charlotte feared. My own mother had betrayed her sister for years. I walked back into the church slowly, my legs like water. I sat in the front pew, staring at the candles. Then I opened the velvet bag one more time. Only this time. Beneath the USB. Beneath the envelopes. Beneath the legal documents. I found something else. A small photograph. Old. Yellowed. Edges creased. It was taken 25 years ago. It showed 2 little girls. Emily and me. Sitting on a picnic blanket in Aunt Charlotte's backyard. We were smiling. Happy. Innocent. But what made my blood run cold was the handwritten note on the back. Written in Aunt Charlotte's handwriting. It said, if anything happens to me, protect the right daughter. The right daughter? My throat tightened. I turned the photo over again, hands trembling. That's when I saw it. Barely visible unless you were looking for it. A small circle drawn around only one of the girls. Me. The wrong daughter. The daughter my mother hadn't given birth to. But had claimed as her own. The daughter Charlotte had promised to protect. Because my mother wouldn't. The daughter Ian thought could ruin everything. Because the alternate will named her heir. Me. Everything inside me fell silent. And then I finally understood. The secret wasn't about the money. Or the will. Or the insurance. It was about paternity. Not Emily's. Mine. My aunt hadn't been just my aunt. She had been my biological mother. And my mother, the woman who raised me, had known all along.